let's get going. Thank you for joining us in our Thriving in a Perfect Storm webinar. We are launching some research that we've been working on for a while, and at some point you've got to say, let's stop researching and let's start putting it together in a framework. And a few months ago, Dean and I sat down and decided to do just that. And this is what we've come up with. Who are we? If you don't know who we are a team from TomorrowToday Global that includes keynote presenters, leadership development experts, and a consulting arm. My name is Graeme Codrington, and I'm responsible for keeping the team together and specialize in the future of work. That's my passion and my interest. How is the world of work changing, and what can we do today to prepare for the future? Dean?
Hello, morning, afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are in the world. It's great to be here with you. As Graeme said, my name is Dean van Leeuwen, and I'm the Chief Exploration Officer at TomorrowToday. My primary focus is on the consulting side, helping organizations make sense of all of the change happening around them and figure out how to build competitive advantage, or actually really how to create the future. That's what really excites us.
So here's what we want to do. The research that we've been doing over a number of years, not just during COVID, but actually pre-COVID, was to try and get a clearer picture of the forces that are going to shape the world of the 2020s. I think it was probably in 2015 or 2016 that we first started thinking about how can we get 2020 vision. It was a bit of a cheesy tagline, but it was there for the taking. And now that we're in the 2020s, we want to, of course, keep as clear a vision as possible. And COVID has taught us that we have to have eyes wide open as we head into this crazy decade. So we're going to talk about what we've seen and what we've identified are the key forces that are going to shape this decade ahead of us. Then what we want to do is show you that if you can keep your eyes on these disruptive forces and make sure you're not quite as surprised by things that happen, you can then replace a crisis or reactive mindset with a more proactive, opportunity-led mindset. And we're using a word, if you can, prepare ourselves for what's coming. And what we've seen, and this is really the bulk of the research that we've been doing, is we've been looking at businesses that seem to be very good at dealing with disruption, not just surviving it, but actually thriving. And interestingly enough, there are a number of different organizations in different industries in different parts of the world that have actually had their best years ever in the last year or two during COVID. And we think we've seen something about the DNA that those firms have got that we can share with you and that you can build into your organization now. So that's the roadmap. Let's dive in. We love this quote from Ayrton Senna. He was one of, some people suggest, I think, the greatest Formula One driver of all time. Dangerous sport, of course, and he sadly passed away during one of the races. But Ayrton Senna was famous for saying, you can't overtake 15 cars on a sunny day. You know, that's not possible. That's not how the sport works. But on a rainy day, it's possible to overtake many cars. And he was a genius in the rain. Sometimes the rain is a good thing.
Thanks, Graeme. You know, it's a wonderful quote, isn't it? I mean, you know, when Ayrton Senna said he couldn't overtake 15 cars in rainy weather, he didn't mean that he could take more risks. What he meant was that he never had the biggest budgets or best resources. So when it was sunny, it was difficult to get ahead. But when it rained, his competitors became more conservative, and he could then use his driving skills to overtake them. Adverse conditions actually favored him. The 20s will be a decade of disruption. We've been saying this since the late sort of 2010s. And we've seen this confluence of a number of transformative forces. They're colliding. And now most organizations are going to try and weather the storm. They're going to batten down the hatches. They're going to stick to their knitting, hoping that what got them here will get them there. And the unfortunate reality of organizations that take that approach during this perfect long storm is that they may never be seen again. Now, the leaders are boldly exploring the opportunities that this rainy weather is giving them. And by understanding these transformative forces and the impact that they're going to have, you can seize the opportunities to really create and to get ahead. Now, the perfect long storm is, as mentioned, about this confluence of 7 mega forces, and we're going to share kind of the headline trends of what we're seeing about these forces. These are forces that are very visible. So visible, in fact, that they tend to be ignored. And we call them gray elephants. Now, gray elephants are defined as highly probable, high impact, yet ignored forces of change. COVID was a gray elephant. We've known long well that pandemics would disrupt the world, and yet these warnings were ignored. We know that aging, climate change, inequality are all powerful forces, yet they too are being ignored. Now, the thing is, every 150 years, powerful forces of progress, they collide, they come together, they collide. And the world that then emerges is vastly different. We can see these moments when you look back, the Industrial Revolution, the Renaissance, the Age of Discovery, periods of transformative, dramatic change. Now, the ancient Greeks had a name for these transformative moments in history, and they called them Kairos Moments. Now, Kairos moments for the ancient Greeks were rare, opportune moments where the leaders who were tuned towards change, they could seize opportunity. You see, for them, Kairos was a god with wings, and you could see him flying towards you. And if you were alert, and as Kairos flew past, you could catch that opportunity, you could grab it. But once the opportunity had passed you, you could never recapture it. It was gone. And I'm sure you've seen those moments. You see something happen, you think, wow, if only I'd seen the trends that were leading towards that, if only I'd seen that opportunity. Or you saw an opportunity, but because maybe you hesitated or weren't quite sure how it might play out, you missed that opportunity. Well, we want to help you to understand the opportunities that these gray elephants are presenting, because the winners of this decade will be those who are tuned towards change, tuned towards these 7 great gray elephants. And we're going to tell you a little bit more about these powerful forces of change now.
Thanks, Dean. So obviously we're not going to go into full detail with those 7 forces that Dean was talking about today. We're just going to do a quick overview for you. But as Dean said, we're not looking for, if we can stretch the animal analogy just a little bit further, we're not looking for the so-called black swans. Those things may or may not happen, but too many companies spend too much time trying to look for the things that we can't see and ignore these big elephants sitting in the corner of the room. Let's have a look at them very, very briefly. The first is that we have got an aging population. Those of you who've seen us talk before, you might know that we often talk about demographics. It's part of a model called the Tides model of change that we use to help us look for these forces and develop scenarios for the future. And we believe that the aging population in the world is one of the most powerful forces for change. It's causing 4 or 5 different generations to be in the workspace at the same time. People are retiring later. They are retiring and then coming back to work as consultants. So they're not leaving the workspace. When they get into their 60s, 70s, and 80s, they're still active in the economy. They've actually, probably that older generation has got the most money around. And in a youth-obsessed world, we sometimes forget that. We sometimes forget that the older generation has a significant, powerful force in the world. The question, of course, is what's the opportunity? So that's the angle we're trying to bring with this thriving in a perfect storm. You don't just look at what might happen in the future and the forces, but you look for that Kairos opportunity. And so here we have to ask, in your industry, what's the opportunity? There are going to be customers, the baby boomer generation who are in their 60s and 70s now, are the youngest 60 and 70-year-olds the world has ever had. They're the healthiest, and by the way, they are the richest. And at the moment, they're not just the richest old people the world has ever had. They are the richest generation in general and overall that the world has ever seen. And we live in a youth-obsessed world where a lot of companies spend a lot of time trying to say, how do we get younger consumers into our value chain? How do we get the youth market? The youth market has no money. The youth market, many of them in their 20s, are still relying on the older generation to fund them. And that's not a slight on the young people. I think that's a structural problem that needs to be resolved. But from an opportunity perspective, how is your business taking advantage of these? And if you want to get very practical, which of course we would want to get with any of these strategic planning, budgeting, targeting conversations, one of my favorite examples is work we've done with a few of our clients over the years. Call centers. Think of what a call center operative does, right? They sit on their backside all day, speaking on a phone, helping somebody else solve a problem. And in between those phone calls, they have a cup of coffee and chat to their friends. Now, I've got young adult daughters, and I can tell you for sure that that doesn't fit the profile of my 20-something daughters. When I think of that job description or that outline of what the job actually entails, it sounds a lot more like my mother than my daughters. And I'm not trying to be sexist, it's my father as well. It sounds like old people, not young people. So that's what we've done. We've helped clients to put older people, people in their 60s and 70s into call centers. It's made a remarkable difference, including, by the way, just people being more polite as they speak to the call center operative, because you can hear you're speaking to an older person and suddenly you discover your manners on the phone rather than shouting at the call center. We're just demonstrating, we could spend an hour talking about this, but there's just an example of how seeing a big force for change, seeing a big mega trend, can then lead you to looking for opportunities and lead you to a business idea which could make a big difference to you. So we're not going to spend as much time, but that gives you the kind of flow and feel of the types of conversations we think you should be having using this framework of ours. So the second one is the angry planet. I think that makes sense. That's obviously climate change and extreme weather, and it's other issues like pollution, for example, and maybe more pandemics in the future. The planet's sort of fighting back. Ask ourselves, what are the opportunities there? And again, depending on what industry you're from, depending on what business you come from, there could be plenty of opportunities in sustainability, ESG functions, in alternative energy futures. Again, we open our eyes to look beyond the crisis to see the Kairos behind it. The third big force that we've seen is multi-polarity. Now, this is something that's really been highlighted with what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. Multipolarity is language that Vladimir Putin has been using since he became president of Russia. And it's about making sure, from a Russian perspective, from a Chinese perspective, from an African perspective, from a Southeast Asian perspective, that America doesn't dominate the world. And countries around the world, India would be included on that list, the BRICS countries, are all hoping that we build a world that's got multiple power centers. And this is deliberately what Putin is trying to do. We predicted some of what he's doing at the moment a while ago on the basis of the fact that he is trying to break down American power. And this is going to accelerate through the rest of the 2020s. And depending on the industry you're in, you need to look at what happens after American power is diminished and other centers of power emerge all around the world. That's what we call multipolarity. In the meantime, we get a big squeeze. And the big squeeze is economic, and in other ways, it's supply chain issues, it's inflation causing a squeeze on us and our oil prices and things at the moment. And those of you who are in South Africa might be experiencing, some of you who are saying there might be connection issues, might simply be in South Africa. We've got a big squeeze on energy production at the moment, which then has knock-on effects to our internet connections and all sorts of other things. And it's happening all over the world. We're not the only country, South Africa is not the only country in the world dealing with power issues and connectivity issues. It's happening everywhere, including in America. That then flows into inequality. And we believe multipolarity, big squeezes, inequality sort of form a nice triangle of forces that you have to take seriously. History tells us that when the divide between rich and poor gets too big, well, this is maybe where it's tough to look for the opportunity in what I'm about to say, because history tells us the next thing that happens is a revolution. And I don't mean that metaphorically, I mean that literally. When that divide gets too big, history is clear about what happens next, and it's not pretty for the owners of capitals and the kings and queens of companies. Now, I know I'm mixing my historical metaphors there, but you get the point. And we've got to have a look at the fact that there are more people on strike now than have ever been before, because people are looking at inequality in society, in communities, and in companies as well, and asking, is this really the future? And that inequality and the big squeezes and the multipolarity are all working together to say people are at a moment in time where they're saying, we want a change. We need a systems change. And it's not clear yet which new system is going to emerge. It's not just choosing the best of the old systems, but it's deliberately creating a new system. Now, obviously, part of that is going to be a technology-driven shift. And Dean, let me bring you in here to talk about intelligent advances. We're playing with language here. We like to talk about the fact that it's not artificial intelligence, it's not AI, it's actually IA, by which we mean intelligent assistance. But we want to go further than that, and we've called it intelligent advancements. Dean?
Yeah, intelligent advances really looks at the force of AI and robotics and machine learning and automation, I guess. When most companies think of AI and robotics, they immediately think, well, how do we automate? How do we reduce our costs and so on? Whereas the real benefit of AI and robotics is the advancements of humankind. How do we make the world a better place? How do we move from automation to augmentation? How do we create superhuman productivity and superhuman organizations? And it's about combining the best of AI and machines with the best of humankind and those strengths. So, because what we're getting people to ask is, who's this advancement for? Is it for the advancement of the machines, or is it for the advancement of humanity and humankind? Now, the last sort of 4 industrial revolutions have been hard on the planet. They've been hard on humanity. But there's a real opportunity now to start the 5th industrial revolution. And the 5th industrial revolution is where machines and humans come together to create a better future. And if we don't get this right, I think this is a key thing about these forces, these 7 great gray elephants, is if we don't ask the questions and if we don't find the right solutions, then, well, the 21st century could be our best century. It could also be our worst. It's balancing on a knife's edge. So in many ways, the last one, the angry people, it's kind of a summary of all of the other forces, because if we don't get the other forces, the solutions to the other forces right, we're going to end up with a lot of angry people. And we're already seeing it. Rise of populism, the rise of the have-nots, people saying, we wake up on the wrong side of capitalism. It's for the elites, it's not here for us. We want something different, we want something new. And as you can see, all of these forces are feeding off one another. So the more you have angry people, the more you have people saying capitalism is wrong, the more that feeds multi-polarity and Putin saying, we need a new world order. We need to align with China and India and the BRICS and Africa to create a better system, because this one's not working. So we need to find out the solutions, and otherwise we're going to have a lot of angry people, and we're going to have a lot more unrest. And when you have unrest, you have social unrest. That's when real change happens. The wonderful thing about
sorry to interrupt you, Dean. People might be thinking, okay, I can see some of the opportunities in maybe multipolarity. I can see some of the opportunities in intelligent advances. You might be wondering, where are the opportunities? How do I get a positive Kairos mindset for angry people? And of course, the answer there is, if you make sure that your people are not angry, you can overtake those 15 cars, as Ed and Senna was saying. If everybody else is stuck in a place where their employees, their colleagues are saying, this isn't working for me, I'm feeling the squeeze, I'm feeling that I'm being left out, and you find a way to get people feeling like they are included, like they belong, like they are part of, you have then found that Kairos opportunity to get ahead of others. We could probably add into this a number of other things. That extra elephant over there is when you do this work with your team, you'd probably add to our list. We think these are the 7 big elephants that are sitting around, that everybody's going to be possibly trampled by if they don't notice them. And you might add to them things like the Great Resignation and so on would come with it. But look for those opportunities. Before I hand back to you, Dean, just a reminder to everybody, please put questions into the chat box. We're going to come to an extended Q&A in a second week. There's too many people on here to just let you open your microphones, so we're going to be using the chat box. If you are watching the recording later, contact us. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to take your emails. But Dean, let's move on then to say, if this is what the future is going to look like, if these are the forces shaping the future, what do we do about it?
Yeah, absolutely, Graeme. I think that's a great segue, because as many, say, challenges and problems that these grey elephants create, there are also opportunities. And let's not forget, the future is not determined. We can create the future by understanding, and this is the great thing about this kind of sort of Kairos moment, is that the leaders who identify these forces, who identify this Kairos moment, they grab the opportunities to shape the future. And that's the power of understanding these forces, is that you become more proactive in shaping the future. We all have a circle of influence, and it's about having a positive influence on that circle. So we've been doing research into over time. We've looked over history, over these great transformative periods. We're looking at leaders now at the moment, and we've identified what we call kind of 4 imperatives for success during Kairos moments. And Graeme, why don't you talk to people about the first one, which is building ecosystems?
Sure. So the first thing that we need to do, and these sort of 4 go in order. This is what you have to build into your system to be prepared for whatever happens, right? So Bruce in the chat, it's time to put on the raincoats and start overtaking some cars. And Bruce, you're exactly right. The question then is, so what do you have to build? What if you like is in the machine that will allow you to do that? And the first is thinking of yourself as part of an ecosystem. What does that mean? Externally, outside of your business, it means that you've got to think outside of your business. There's nobody who's going to survive the perfect long storm with going it alone. If you become more insular, if you say we're protecting our business and our IP, we want to keep everything in-house, you're not going to survive. The companies that are doing the best at the moment are companies that, if you want to use slightly different language, we're using language that is deliberately unfamiliar so that you think it through. So ecosystems, but let's use familiar language. You need to look for the platform play. If you've got any form of technology driving your business and industry, you've got to be thinking about platforms. So Amazon, WeChat, and Alibaba are probably your best examples. But what can you do to integrate your value chain? Bring your suppliers closer, bring your customers closer. Ensure that you've got a much more dedicated ecosystem and that you are the preferred partner in that ecosystem. Internally, then, you want to become the preferred choice for the best people in your industry. A magnet for talent, if you want to use the cliche, but it's more than that, because you might have to think, we don't have to employ all of these people. We can build an ecosystem in which we use the gig economy, in which we use new thinking about the future of work, more than just whether we hybrid or not, more than just a response to COVID, but building an environment in which the best people in your industry can give you their best. And if you want slightly different language, we love the language of anti-fragile. I think it was Nassim Nicholas Taleb who wrote a book with this title, who really sort of sparked this thinking about 10 years ago. And we don't think enough people are thinking this way. Anti-fragile is not a label we have in English. Maybe other languages have it, but in English you've got fragile. If something is fragile, it's breakable. My phone is fragile, right? If I smash it with a hammer, it's going to break and I won't be able to use it. What I want it to be is not fragile. And so you can see I put a nice big thick military grade thing on it. I can bang my phone on the desk here and it's not going to break. I'm glad it didn't. And that is what we call resilient, right? Or Sandy, you've said robust, right? Which means if it takes a hit, it doesn't break. But we think you've got to go a step further. And you've got to look at beyond resilience to anti-fragile. We don't have that word. Anti-fragile would mean if I hit this phone, it gets stronger. That's why we've got a picture of this tree being blown by the wind. Trees and natural plants have to actually be battered a little bit by the elements as they are growing up. If a tree gets battered by the wind, it actually breaks. Not completely. You don't want something to be completely broken because then it's dead. But if it breaks just a little bit, it sort of stretches, snaps a little bit, it then grows back stronger. The bark and the trunk of the tree gets stronger as it's battered. Your muscles do the same thing. If you go to the gym and you exercise to the point of being sore, it's because your muscles have actually torn a little bit. And and then they grow back stronger, and you can actually lift stronger weights. And in different industries, we see this happen. A best example is the airline industry. When one aeroplane crashes, they immediately rush to get that little black box that they've got to look at what happened. And then every other aeroplane in the world gets upgraded to make sure that it is anti-fragile. And that's what you've got to build into your system. And we use the language of ecosystems to get you to think about that. The second thing that we need to do is be bionic. And I don't have to say much more about this because Dean's already talked about it. It's not about becoming the $6 million man. I remember that from your childhood, if you're roughly, Dean, in my age. It's not about this human hybrid machine type thing. It's exactly what Dean was talking about a few minutes ago with the fifth industrial revolution. Are we building a world that's good for machines, but not good for people? Well, that world is not going to work. And are we building a world that's good for people, but doesn't include technology? Well, of course, I mean, that would be silly. So we need to build a world where humans and machines work together. And we don't think enough people are having that conversation. Too many people are talking about efficiency and technology automation, and not enough are talking about human-machine integration, where machines do the stuff they're good at, and humans do the stuff that we're good at, and together we build a better world. Talking about a better world, Dean, over to you for the third piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, Graeme. So the third imperative for success in this moment of Kairos, this decade of disruption, is being a force for good. And what we're seeing is a subtle but important shift happening in the world of capitalism. Over 85% of people, your employees, your customers, are saying that the role of business in society is to address big societal problems. And in 2019, the CEOs from 181 of the world's largest corporations signed a charter saying that the purpose of business is no longer shareholder returns, but that the purpose of business is to deliver benefits to all stakeholders. Now, this is a massive pivot from shareholder capitalism towards stakeholder capitalism. Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, the world's largest asset management company with over 10 trillion assets under management, said in his annual letter to CEOs and business leaders that purpose is not the sole pursuit of profits, but the animating force for achieving them. So for him, profits are not in any way inconsistent with purpose. In fact, profits and purpose are inextricably linked. So our research shows that the leaders of the 2020 will be those organizations who use their assets as a force for good. There are massive world problems where businesses can make profit and do good at the same time. Now, being a force for good is not a measure of goodness. You know, businesses are complex entities. Rather, what it means to be a force for good is that doing well by doing good becomes central to your purpose and central to your profit-making strategies. The question you need to be asking is, are our strategies aligned to doing well by doing good, or are we still chasing profit and shareholder returns? Now, the final imperative for success in this new Kairos moment is becoming an explorer, or being explorers. You know, the thing is about these Kairos moments is that the world has never been here before. There are no roadmaps to show you the way into the future. What got you here will not get you there. And not since the last age of discovery have so many new frontiers opened in the areas of science, health, engineering, education, and space travel. There are massive problems in the world where businesses can make a profit and do good at the same time. So, it's a fantastic new way of thinking about businesses. It has positive spin-offs, and that attracts more customers, best talent.
Dean, before you go on to the last piece, I just want to bring in something that Gwyn has said in the chat box. Thanks, Gwyn. Gwyn was commenting on what I was saying about being bionic, and was saying that it's having a devastating effect on employment in the agricultural sector. And we know this. We've got lots of examples. I think the agricultural sector is probably automating faster than any other sector in the world at the moment. And of course, that has a huge impact on especially low-paid and low-wage workers. But then Gwyn goes on to say that there's a massive opportunity. So there's the mindset. You need to bring the Kairos mindset for a growth of a services industry that is linked to the agricultural industry. And I just wanted to jump in and sort of take this as a comment and a question, because this is why the model is actually set up in the way that it is, where we need to talk about businesses being a force for good. If your only focus as an agricultural business is to just go for efficiency, then you probably will automate and get rid of all of your staff. But what the impact does that have on the community around you, and what opportunities have you missed if you don't think further than just that profit bottom line? What happens 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What happens to the community around your farm? And here in South Africa, where I'm based, a lot of that can lead to quite a lot of clashes between the local communities and the farmers, which makes farming actually quite a dangerous thing to do. And that's not just a South African thing, that is happening globally. And so this is the point of the model that we're presenting to you, that these 4 elements, and Dean will present the last element, which you will see is one of the most important. If the others help you to think about what you must do, the last element helps you to work out how you go about it. But you've got to think beyond the short term. You've got to think beyond just reactive mindset, responsive mindset. What we're trying to do with this framework of thriving in a perfect storm is to get you to look at the decade that lies ahead and make more longer term and clever strategic decisions. So thanks, Gwyn, for that impact and input. Sorry, Dean, to interrupt you. Let's get to that final piece of the puzzle.
Let me just add to that, and Gwyn, thanks, a great comment and question there. You'll see that all of these 4 kind of, we call them imperatives for success in the 2020s, are interlinked. And the Bionic is an interesting one, because most companies, when they think about AI and exponential and the advances in technology, they turn towards automation. And they think, how can we become more profitable and improve performance and efficiencies? But what we really need to do when you become bionic is we need to move from automation to augmentation. Machines are never really going to completely replace people. There's so much value that people can create. So what we need to do is create a workforce that is augmented with this incredible technology, and it frees up people to do the things that they are good at doing. And the organizations who are forces for good are looking at this. They're saying, how do we use today's technology to free up our resources from the dangerous and the drudgery of work, and allowing them to really put their creative, empathy, all of those great things forward, and really turn this world around to being a better place. And so let's move on to this last imperative, which is about being an explorer. Now, the key thing about these Kairos moments is that we've never been here before. Graeme mentioned aging as one of these gray elephants. And this, when you look at the statistics of aging, they're phenomenal. And the statistics are telling us that by 2030, there will be more old people living on planet Earth than young. Now, we've never had that before. More people over the age of 60 than under the age of 20 for the first time in human history. So what's this world going to look like? We don't have a roadmap. We can't predict. When you go through these moments of Kairos, if you were standing at the start of the Industrial Revolution, the age of discovery, you couldn't predict what the future was going to look like because it would be so different. So we need to have the mindset of an explorer. We need to look at these opportunities. We need to experiment. We need to play. We need to look at doing things differently, because the reality is what got you here will not get you there. That's the reality. So let me tell you the story about a guy called Sebastian Thrun. Sebastian Thrun was Google's, he was the leader of their innovation lab called Google X, or just X. And he was the lead scientist on their self-driving, the automated car. And when Sebastian was trying to make this automated car, he wasn't trying to develop a slightly better car. He was coming up with a radical new way of mobility, because he was exploring this question: how do we end road fatalities? See, his best friend died when he was 18 in a car accident, and Sebastian said that he was going to go on a quest to save 1 million lives every year. 1 million lives, a number of people who die from road accidents around the world. And when Sebastian put his mind to solving that question, how do we end road fatalities? Automated cars, self-driving cars just became the obvious solution. So we need explorers. We need people who will question those things that we think are impossible. Most of us think, road accidents, they're an unnatural and unfortunate part of modern life. We don't imagine a world where there would be road fatalities. Being an explorer, being a moonshot thinker is all about asking and believing that you can have a world without road accidents. So, in this new age of discovery, we need to create the mindsets, the DNA of explorers in our leaders, in our teams, in our company. And what this means to you is you have to create cultures of curiosity. We have to empower people to experiment. You have to create psychological safety zones, and you have to encourage people to feel safe enough to fail. Now, at Tomorrow Today Consulting, we work with our clients to build these cultures of innovation, not by coming up with great ideas, but rather by identifying the great issues, the great problems that need solving. Steve Jobs said that, some people give customers what they want, but that's not my approach. Our approach is to figure out what they are going to want before they do. And he said, I think that Henry Ford once said, if I'd asked customers what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse. People don't know what they want until you show it to them. And that's why Steve Jobs said, it's our task to read the things that are not yet on the page. That's how you get ahead in this, this decade of disruption. You want to create a culture of exploration where people feel empowered to read the things that are not yet on the page.
So we think that Abraham Lincoln had it spot on when he said that the best way to predict the future, because we can't predict the future, is actually to create it. And what he meant by that is when you sense the Kairos opportunity, when you've done the work that we've very briefly outlined for you, where you are seeing the big forces that are coming, you're recognizing the questions that are going to be asked, and you building the DNA of an organization that can take advantage of opportunities as they emerge, you will then be in a position to get ahead of that change, to get ahead of the storm, and to navigate your way through it. And if you're focusing on all the things that need to be done, but put this sort of filter, this lens filter on top of it, of saying, are we building an ecosystem, or are we becoming more insular? Are we becoming more bionic, or are we replacing the people and ignoring the technology? Are we being a force for good, or are we being much more short-sighted in the way that we just chase profits and profitability? And are we being explorers? Are we being brave? And John Hofmeyer, to come to the question you asked, do we have a little bit of excess capacity in our system? By excess capacity, I mean a little bit of budget, a little bit of people's time that can be allocated to experimentation, that can be allocated to trying things, knowing that some of the things won't work. We could spend an hour answering your question, John, by saying, you need to minimize the risk, you need to fail fast, you need to reduce your experiments down to the smallest possible sizes, that you're not burning the place down and not wasting a lot of money. But in reality, we also have to say to you, it's probably more dangerous to not experiment and fail on a few things than it is to try and make no mistakes and waste no money at all. And you've got to find that balance. There's no simple answer to your question, but we know that the answer is are we exploring more than we used to? And have we built some DNA? If we do that, we can then navigate whatever storm comes our way. And if we focus on trying to anticipate the storm that is coming, we'll be well ahead of everybody else. So this is what we do at Tomorrow Today. We help people to see the future with a Kairos mindset and build organizations that can deal with whatever comes their way. And we would love to help you if we can. This can be done as a keynote presentation at an event. Maybe it's your strategy conference or your annual event where you just want to get people into the right frame of mind for thinking about the future and building plans. Maybe you want Dean and his consulting team to do a little bit more with you and to walk with you over a period of time, to take you slowly through the steps we've rushed through today and actually do this work with your team. Please be in touch with us if there's any way that we can assist you. This is what we do all day, every day. And I know we get paid to do it, but we love it. And it gets us out of bed every morning. From myself, Graeme, it's been fantastic spending the hour with you. Dean, I'll leave the final word to you and then we'll say goodbye.
Absolutely. Thanks, Graeme. It's been wonderful spending this past hour with you. Hopefully we've given you some thought-provoking impacts and information. Contact us if you'd like to learn more. And all I can say is this is going to be an incredible decade for those who are tuned towards the change. And so seize the opportunity.